remercie Son Excellence.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Shukri, for his statement, and I now give the floor to Her Excellency, Ms. Mariam Al-Sadiq Al-Mahdi, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Sudan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. On behalf of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate, President, I should like at the outset to congratulate you for your accession to the presidency of the Council during July, and wish you every success in your work. We extend our congratulations to the distinguished permanent representative of Estonia for their remarkable presidency of the Council last month. I would also like to thank the distinguished members of the Council, and France in particular, for having accepted the request to organize this meeting on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is of great importance to my country. And it underscores the interest of the Security Council to the partnership with the African Union to promote international peace and security, both in Africa and across the world. I also thank Mr. Onanga and Ms. Anderson for their enlightening briefings. I thank the representative of the DRC, in addition, speaking on behalf of the Chair of the African Union. I would also like to thank all members of the Council for their statements and the exchange and sharing of experiences on the functioning and filling of dams. I would also like to pay tribute to my colleague, His Excellency the Egyptian Foreign Affairs Minister, and the Ethiopian Minister of Irrigation, as well as my colleague, the Minister of Irrigation, who is accompanying me. President, Sudan very much welcomes the role and efforts of the African Union since it undertook the negotiation process with the three states concerned on the Renaissance Dam. My country reaffirms the need for this process to continue under the auspices of the African Union, and the need to continue cooperation with it so as to reach a just, equitable, acceptable solution for all the parties. We address ourselves to you today to ask for your support and to call upon you to play a positive role in resolving this thorny dispute. Sudan, above all, reaffirms the fact that we have always admitted and recognized the rights of our neighbor Ethiopia to exploit now and in the future the waters of the Nile. Since the outset, we have therefore supported the construction of this dam, knowing very well that its advantages would not be restricted to Ethiopia alone, upon the condition that its filling and functioning happened according to a legally binding agreement, which takes into account the principles of equitable, reasonable use and exploitation of cross-border water resources without inflicting significant harm on downstream states, and in such a way as to respect the human rights foundations and to promote good neighborly relations between states. We are aware of the usefulness of this dam to prevent droughts and ensure regular water flow throughout the year. These advantages would be achieved if the Grand Dam is filled and functions in such a way that we are informed of it and understand it. This is indeed one of the principles of the use and rights and laws across the world in this regard. In Africa, we have a number of successful examples which have contributed to the stability of states sharing cross-border rivers. By way of example, the important example of 4 West African states which have continued to manage in cooperation the Senegal River since 1972. Another example is that of 8 African states who have continued to manage jointly the Niger River under a legally binding agreement concluded in 1980. Nevertheless, in the absence of an agreement on the filling and functioning of the dam, the advantages of the Renaissance Dam could become true threats for half of the Sudanese population and for the inhabitants of Egypt. The Renaissance Dam, this gigantic African project, could be a living example of fruitful cooperation for over 250 million African citizens, as long as it is used with full awareness and founded upon cooperation and complementarity. Sudan has huge areas of fertile arable land, which could provide to the three countries of the region, even to the whole world, a high level of sustainable food security. Electricity would be provided by Ethiopia, whilst Egypt would provide the capacity regarding processing industries. And the three countries could also ensure qualified labour. The dam would, in that way, be an enlightening example of regional cooperation. President, Sudan underscores the importance of the legally binding agreement regarding the filling and functioning of the dam for the following reasons. 1. Protection of human security in Sudan. 2. Protection of Sudanese dams. 3. Protection of the strategic security of Sudan. The existence of an enormous dam, such as the Renaissance Dam, with a 74 billion cubic meter capacity, just a few kilometers from the Sudanese border, and in the absence of coordination with the communities downstream of this river regarding safety measures, could transform it into a direct danger for these communities. Regarding human security, for millennia, the ways of life of millions of Sudanese people consists of living alongside the Nile and its affluents. These communities live essentially from river agriculture, but the Renaissance Dam could modify the way of life of these millions of people and cause a 50% reduction in the in riverland which is usable. This is a price that we could pay, as long as these communities could then benefit from regular flow of the Nile whilst also being protected against the devastating effects of floods. However, what we could in no way accept would be for the filling and functioning techniques of the dam, adopted unilaterally, be a way of terrorizing these citizens, of sweeping aside their dignity, violating their human rights, as Ethiopia did a few months ago by invoking its individual right to decide unilaterally upon the modalities for the functioning of the dam. Ethiopia has in this way unilaterally closed the test case dam on the Steep River in Ethiopia. This led to the drought of over a large area of water downstream of the river. Again, last June, unilaterally, Ethiopia notified the Sudanese Irrigation Ministry that it intended to open the dam to allow 2.5 billion cubic meters to pass in just 2 weeks, which caused the ministry, through the media, to inform those living alongside the Stit River of the need to evacuate their homes in 72 hours, just 72 hours. I can leave it to you to imagine the panic and terror Ethiopia also filled the Renaissance Dam during the first year to 5 billion cubic meters without prior notification, which caused a drop in the water level in the Blue Nile quite suddenly, and the total stoppage of 3 water stations for over 3 days in the town of Khartoum, in the city of Khartoum. not to mention the economic and political consequences, which were considerable of this decision, and which the whole world bore witness to. Finally, the Ethiopian irrigation minister on the 5th of July sent a letter to us affirming Ethiopia's determination to carry out the filling of the dam for the second consecutive year. This causes and will cause considerable damage to Sudan. Ethiopia has thus clearly shown and demonstrated its behavior with regard to the Sudanese citizens in the absence of a legally binding agreement by sweeping aside the neighborly rights and unilaterally using its capacity to manage the dam built in its country, thus imperiling the peace and security of Sudanese citizens. Regarding the protection of Sudanese dams, the Ruseres Dam is 100 kilometers from the Renaissance Dam and measures less than a tenth of the size of the Renaissance Dam in terms of its capacity, its water capacity. This dam irrigates almost 70% of the irrigated agricultural projects in the Sudan, with the other dams generating almost 40% of electricity in Sudan. Therefore, as a result of a regular flow of information on the modalities of filling and functioning of the Renaissance Dam, the safety and security of the Roseres Dam will be seriously threatened. Moreover, the capacity of the 10 dams to generate electricity and provide the necessary water for strategic projects, part of our Al Jazeera project and other projects which Sudan depends upon for its food security and its agricultural investment, would be doomed to failure. Regarding now the protection of the strategic security of the Sudan, as we have already underlined, 70% of irrigated agricultural projects in the Sudan which currently exist depend upon dams built in the Sudan on the Blue Nile Basin. Therefore, it is crucial for us to be kept abreast of the filling and functioning methods of the Renaissance Dam, so that Sudan can plan now and in the future its agricultural projects. Everybody is aware that the Sudan is now open to the world after the success of our glorious revolution and thanks to the huge sacrifices made by the Sudanese youth and the leading of the revolution by Sudanese women and men with courage and perseverance. Sudan and its name has thus been removed from the list of countries advocating terrorism. And this has been done in a dazzling way for the whole world. The Sudanese people have managed to free themselves of the totalitarian regime which terrorized them and which targeted the communities of Darfur and the east of Sudan. These criminal acts spared none of the Sudanese provinces, and the whole world celebrated this glorious revolution, conducted pursuant to a civilian and military partnership, which is a unique Sudanese model, so as to achieve peace, in which it was successful by the signing of the Juba Agreement. Sudan is resolved to continue with its actions to peace, and the Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is currently chairing the IGAD. where we are working to preserve regional stability in the east of Africa and neighbouring countries in West Africa. Sudan has carried out deep economic reform based upon its faith in cooperation with the rest of the world. Indeed, during the Paris conference, France celebrated the return of the Sudan to the international community and back into the fold by underscoring the opening of the Sudan to the world and its interest to build and found intelligent, smart partnerships in all areas where agricultural investment would be preponderant. Therefore, attempts by Ethiopia to impose their hegemony in a unilateral manner with regard to the filling and functioning of the Renaissance Dam is extremely serious and threatens to undermine progress and to undermine the promising future which is beginning to appear on the horizon for the Sudan. Ethiopia has been our neighbour for better, for worse, and we are linked by a relationship throughout history of cooperation, solidarity, and a concern to safeguard our common interests by strengthening brotherly relations between our two peoples. Which means that we wish to continue down this same path so as to achieve a solution which will preserve the lasting links between our two countries. Based upon our faith in regional cooperation, the Sudan has participated in good faith and effectively in all the rounds of tripartite negotiation on the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam since their beginning in 2011 and until today. I wish to underscore here the colossal efforts made by the Sudan to persuade its two neighbours, Egypt and Ethiopia, to sign the Declaration of Principles in Khartoum in March 2015. We also wish to underline the initiative of Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok in June 2020, which aimed to continue negotiations on the few pending questions in the Washington round in June 2020. Sudan responded to the initiative of His Excellency the Presidency of South Africa and of the African Union in the 2020 session, so as to find an internal solution to this dispute. Sudan has also participated very effectively in all the negotiating rounds for over 6 months. However, the failure of improvement in the negotiating mechanism by conferring a greater role to experts once again has resulted in the failure of agreement. Moreover, Sudan has continued its positive commitment by participating in the last round called by the President of the DRC and the President who is currently chairperson of the African Union. And in this regard, Sudan submitted a proposal to bolster the African negotiation mechanism by transforming it into a mediation under the auspices of the African Union, or under the African Union leadership, with the participation of the UN, EU, South Africa, the three latter having been observers to preceding negotiations. However, for the same reasons relative to Ethiopian intransigence and its rejection of all proposals put forward, this round was also unsuccessful. President, we dearly hope that the Council will assume its responsibilities in maintaining regional peace and security in a preventative way by strengthening and stepping up negotiations under the auspices of the African Union in the following ways: calling upon the parties concerned to resume negotiations under the auspices of the African Union and allowing international mediators and observers to assume their role so as to facilitate negotiations and reach an agreement. To call upon Ethiopia to abstain from any unilateral measure without prior agreement which could constitute a threat for millions of inhabitants behind the Renaissance Dam. Before I conclude, I should like to say unequivocally that this issue is a just cause. You are called, ladies and gentlemen, to promote a process which continues to meet obstacles, and you can help this process easily, freely, by freeing the courageous people of Sudan from their current suffering, by ensuring that the filling and functioning of the Renaissance Dam happens pursuant to a legally binding agreement. However, silence from the Council would send out the wrong message and would mean would signify a tacit approval of the fact that this unilateral filling was acceptable, with all that this would imply in terms of very serious consequences and very harmful consequences for the interests of the Sudan. Excellencies, members of the Council, to conclude, having seized your august counsel of this question with all its serious implications for sovereignty, security, and for the humanitarian dimension and the sovereignty dimension of the fact that this jeopardizes international peace and security and constitutes a direct challenge to your Council's mandate under the Charter of the United Nations. By doing this, we have given the Council the opportunity to take anticipatory measures of a rare and historic nature so that the Council does assume its responsibilities in the various ways it has available to do so, notably through preventative diplomacy, so as to bring the parties back to negotiations and promote African action which all parties had agreed upon by conferring a greater role upon international observers to help the work of the African Union and the United Nations. To conclude, we confirm Sudan's attachment and its commitment to participate in good faith in all efforts which will allow the parties to achieve an agreement which respects the interests of all the parties. I thank you.